Cian Tracey, the Irish Independent, is with us. Cian, good morning to you.
Hey lads, how are we?
We have breaking news on the future of Eddie Jones this morning, right? A press release has just dropped in our inbox at 7:59 with big news. Eddie Jones will coach Barbarians FC next May against the Steve Hansen-led World 15 at Twickenham. I mean,
you scared me there for a second. So I was sitting outside on my phone and I was like, I didn't get any email into my inbox, so yeah, you must be on a special list. Yeah, interesting, but
back to England in May, just to stick their life in for everybody. It's perfect.
It seems like Australia, the Wallabies, so we're kind of hovering, doesn't it? And it almost kind of reminds you of the Warren Gatland situation where he's kind of flirting with Wales that, oh, I'm here, I haven't gone away, you know. So be interesting.
What will he do will he get the big job, or will it just be a consultant for a period of time and then?
I can't see them ditching Dave Rennie at this stage, even though, like, if you think back to that Wales-Australia game, which was the last game of the autumn, if Australia had lost that, Dave Rennie probably would have been the one to lose his job.
And Pivak would have kept his.
Yeah, so it's like it just shows how fine the margins are. I would imagine if the Australian Union get him in, it would probably be like something they did South Africa did in 2007 when Eddie Jones came in as a consultant. But I mean, for Dave Rennie, he probably won't have much say in it anyway, because the people above him will be making the decision. But there's an element of turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it? Particularly when he was under so much pressure. Yeah,
I guess that's one way of looking at it. The other thing is that it looked clear like he has a gig with the USA. I mean, certainly it has been long touted that he's going to get a massive long-term deal with them to take them through 2 World Cup cycles. This is Jones. So maybe you bring Eddie Jones in and you show, oh look, I'm a big man. You work with him for the short period of time up to the next World Cup, and then away he goes and you get the benefit of it. Like, that's, if I'm trying to spin it in a positive way for Dave Rennie, you can come out of this looking good and being the bigger man for the better of your country.
But then again, if it goes really well, people will say, oh, this is Eddie Jones to come in and kind of turn things around, and then all of a sudden you're out of a job. So I don't know, I think a lot will probably depend on Eddie Jones, where he sees himself. There's probably a bit of an element of almost Cristiano Ronaldo, like where does his ambitions lie? Going to USA is a very, very different task. They obviously are going to host a World Cup. That is a job like building from scratch. Like, they clearly don't have the calibre of players, but Eddie Jones would put systems in place there. So that's very different than going to a World Cup, we'll say, with the likes of Australia, who are probably dark horses, really. I mean, it got overlooked this year. They didn't have a great year, but they had so many bad injuries. They gave Ireland a really good game at the Aviva Stadium. So if they can get players back fit, I think, and they're in the good side of the draw, as we keep saying when we're in here. So you never know. So yeah, like it just shows like how fickle the whole game is when there was so much riding on that Wales-Australia game.
You're hearing of all the English lads coming out now saying, it wasn't all Eddie Jones' fault. And I mean, like, surely the players were actually consulted about this whole thing. So
that was a major part of the review that Conor O'Shea was undertaking, like, was going around asking the players. So it's interesting. You've seen Owen Farrell come out, like, he's never going to come out as England captain and slate Eddie Jones. But someone like Lewis Ludlam, I saw, came out, like, you wouldn't say he was a first team starter at all. Anthony Watson has come out. So it's all well and good what you're saying in public, and this is probably part of the reason why the IRFU never really want to release public findings of their review, because they are supposed to be kept, some way confidential, because people are going to be much more honest behind the scenes. But yeah, it's interesting, but it doesn't really surprise me the likes of Watson and Farrell coming out backing him, because Eddie Jones played a massive part in their career as well. But I think I read in one of the papers this morning, Anthony Watson describing Eddie Jones as a world-class human and stuff like this. But again, they're senior players within the setup, so perhaps not that surprising.
Could I say anything else?
Exactly, yeah.
Because if you say anything, like, Steve Borthwick will be looking at you going, so you're disloyal in public to the last guy, what are you going to say about me? You don't want to be...
You're not going to be that.
You don't want to be the early one putting your head above the parapet.
You have to wait for the books to come out.
I was going to say, when somebody's paying you and there's a serialisation...
Owen Farrell's book comes out in a few years, you'll get it all. No, I doubt it. I think he's like his dad.
He seems to be.
Very much cut from the same cloth. Yeah, steady hand.
We get a lot of trouble for not talking about Connacht ever on when it comes to European weeks, but qualify for the European Cup and then we'll prioritise it. But in fairness, Connacht picked a B team and played really well, and not a B team, but certainly not their full strength side. And Andy Ferm was very clear about it. Like, we have strength in depth, but we have to be brave to use it, and they were brave and they got the rewards.
Yeah, like, that was always the big question, like, were they going to put all their eggs in the URC basket to try and get back into the Champions Cup that way? But like, the Challenge Cup is potentially a trophy they could win, but when it gets to the latter stage of that, you're going to have teams dropping in from the Champions Cup as well, so it does get more difficult to win. It's probably a smart approach, to be fair, spreading the talent, and they do have good players coming through Connacht over the last few years, and it's just trying to gel them all together. And I think I was making this point maybe the last time I was on with you, like the big thing for Connacht at the moment is not letting the season peter out, that Andy Friend is leaving. You've seen it happen so many times in all different sports. When you look at Munster, for example, last season, it just kind of like fell away towards the end of it. I don't get the impression that will happen, particularly because you have a guy like Pete Wilkins in there who is definitely the strong favourite to take over from Andy Friend, so you wouldn't imagine the standards are going to drop. But Connacht have left themselves in a tricky position in the URC, but if they're able to pick up wins in the Challenge Cup, like they're going to Brive on Friday night now, like I mean that'll be, Brive are at bottom of the top 14, I think I'm right in saying, but going back over, like they've sacked Jeremy Davison this season, they've got Sammy Arnold who was playing for Connacht up until recently, so that's not going to be easy, a Friday night game. But if they can pick up wins in the Challenge Cup, all of a sudden they get a little bit of momentum and they're going back into the URC then in a much better place, because that performance against Munster a few weeks ago was so disappointing. After just before the break they'd racked up, I think it was 3 wins in a row against the Welsh team, so they've already done their tough part of the season by going to South Africa. The other provinces, Ulster have been there, Munster and Leinster haven't been yet. So they do have a good chunk of the difficult part out of the way, but it is still trying to manage your resources, because there's no doubt they don't have the same strength and depth as the other provinces. But when you have younger guys coming in, like Diarmuid Kilgallen, these kind of guys, Paul Boyle like leading from the front, he's obviously been a good leader for them as well. It's encouraging, but it's not surprising to see that they're going to focus on the URC.
There really are, like, I know they rotated last year, but I suppose they had the benefit of even when their games postponed for COVID, you can rest players regardless. But now all of a sudden they're properly rotating the team, which is, I don't know if it's Andy Friend saying in his last year he wants to really do that, but I mean, I guess the Challenge Cup gives you the opportunity to test those players out.
Yeah, and like the thing is, like you have guys who, you know, you need to manage people's minutes. Now they don't have that same issue compared to other provinces, because simply by the fact that they don't have as many Ireland internationals. Even someone like Bundyaki only came back in and ordinarily would have played a much bigger part for Ireland if he hadn't have been suspended. Like Jack Carty's been out of the setup, so they do have a little bit more wiggle room in terms of managing the resources. But if they can get the younger guys in around the likes of a Bundyaki and a Jack Carty, that's the best way to do it. I think that's one of the things that Leinster, Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster do brilliantly, is that when they are enhancing their strength and depth, they don't necessarily throw loads of young lads in at the same time. They pair them up with experienced guys. So for ages you saw James Ryan playing with Devin Toner, because, you know, that, like, you know, learn off this guy. So I think Connacht, if they can do something similar this weekend, I don't necessarily know if we'll see Bundyaki starting going to Brive at the weekend, because you're just risking him picking up an injury when you need him for the URC, particularly over the festive period, which we know is so busy.
Yeah, let's talk about Leinster. They played Gloucester side, who had come from behind at home against Bordeaux at the opening one, but they did manage to come from behind and they did score 4 tries, so they are on 5 points. What kind of form are Gloucester in other than that coming here?
They're decent, but there's a big discrepancy, I would say, in the Premiership this season. Saracens are back and they're leading the way comfortably out in front. Yeah, like, I mean, Leinster will pay them the full respect, but I would imagine this is 5 points written all over it for Leinster at home, particularly in how they played last week. I mean, Johnny Sexton and Tadhg Furlong started running at the end of last week, but there's absolutely no sense that Leinster are going to rush them back this week, because they don't have to. I think if you had maybe, and no disrespect to Gloucester, if you had like a La Rochelle or someone coming to the RDS, there might be a bit more sense of like, get these guys back, but there isn't. You have Ross Byrne played well in Paris or Le Havre last week, and Michael Alatoa did, so that just sums up maybe the sense of, I don't think there'd be complacency at all from Leinster's part, but they're in such a good place at the moment that they don't need to rush these guys back. And yeah, Gloucester could put it up to them in the early stages, but I mean, yeah, I think it just has 5 points written all over.
I just checked the spread, it's 22 points.
22, yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Yeah, that is, and that's probably not going to be too far wrong. I mean, if you look at how well Leinster played last weekend, they were sensational. It's like watching Ireland, I thought, at times, which is easy to say because you got the same personnel, but it's different systems. But it's just the way the shapes they're running. We've spoken so much, and I know you guys have as well, about the importance of the quick ruck ball. And Leinster, I think I saw Ross Hamilton had 3.09, was the fastest any of the teams over the weekend. And it was interesting actually. Opta had stats up that before the tournament that La Rochelle were the team that were able to slow down opposition rucks the most. I think it was 4.39 was their average. So when you put those two stats together, when Leinster lost the semi-final to La Rochelle two seasons ago, everything that was being built up to beat a team like La Rochelle, and then of course they played them in the final and they lost again. But I get the sense that they've gone away again and they've doubled down on everything they're doing at the moment is try and beat a team like La Rochelle. And when I saw those two stats together, the ruck speeds, it was kind of, this is clearly the focus that they've put on. But you look at the pack, the pack looks a bit beefier with Jason Jenkins in there, Ryan Baird in the back row, looks to have a little bit more of a balance, a bit more punch. So they're in a good place for sure.
Funny position for Leinster to be in, because even the lads on Monday Night Rugby last night talked about the fact that anything but a Heineken Champions Cup win is a failure of a season, which is a remarkable bar to be setting, but I guess that's where Leinster are.
Like, Stuart Lancaster's only won one Champions Cup. Like, it's crazy. Like, if he leaves at the end of the season with one Champions Cup, I think he himself would admit that there's an element of failure might be too strong, but they judge themselves on the highest standard. So no matter what we guys are saying here, they say that internally as well, and have gotten so close, because they have been thereabouts all the time, but to have fallen short is just not good enough for a team like Leinster when you look at the coaching staff that they have and also the playing squad. So they're still clearly hurting from last season. You have the added element of Stuart Lancaster leaving. That's huge motivation for him from a personal point of view. It's from a squad point of view. And then Johnny Sexton's probably last season, you never really know with him, but probably going to be last season. There's a huge amount of motivation. There's definitely a sense that it's now or never for this particular Leinster squad, purely by the fact that they're going to have coaching change over next season. We were talking to Robin McBride yesterday. He's obviously been linked with a return to Warren Gatlin's backroom team, and he's kind of playing that down. You've got Andrew Goodman on the coaching staff, who's getting really, really high praise. He could be a guy who could step up and take on more responsibility when Lancaster leaves. Will Sean O'Brien, will something similar happen? Because it's going to be very difficult for Leinster to go out and get a direct like-for-like replacement for Lancaster, who does attack and defence. So unless they magic someone up, I'm not really sure who could do both to that same standard, or else you might see a restructuring of the coaching staff.
Was it your piece or Rudd's piece that was talking about the long term, the medium term future, where apparently David Nucifora is finished at the end of this next contract? Is there a general consensus he's leaving?
Yeah, that seems to be the sense. All right, I don't think he has said it explicitly, but definitely seems to be the sense that he is on his way out. Yeah, I think he might have even left before, but he's kept on just to get the succession plan. And you're going to ask me about Leo Cullen.
Yeah, so
I don't know. It keeps getting mentioned, but Leo Cullen keeps his cards very close to his chest anyway. It's such a different gig to go into the IRFU and be. I don't really get the sense that it would be Leo Cullen's cup of tea. It'll be it's going to be very interesting to see what Leo Cullen does next season. I'd be shocked. He's going to stay on, but he's obviously been signing these 1 year rolling contracts, which every time it gets announced, that you can kind of feel the sense of panic from Leinster fans, and he obviously has his own personal reasons for doing that. But with Lancaster gone, there's going to be far more of an emphasis on Leo Cullen, because he does a lot of kind of the forward play, but he's going to have to take on more responsibility, I'd imagine, on the pitch. Is that something he wants to do? I'd imagine it is. So taking on David Nucifora's job is very, very different to running Leinster day to day. So I think he would be very good at it, but I don't know. He would be very good at it. But you'll have, I guarantee you now, for me having said that, you'll probably have Munster fans and Ulster fans saying, "Oh, you should get someone from the outside because there'll be natural bias." But I don't get that sense with Leo Cullen at all. I think,
or else we should use the most successful person in Irish rugby.
That's the flip side, yeah. But he's such a steady hand. You look at the job that he's done at Leinster. We've all said, the fact he got Lancaster in at a time when we talk about Eddie Jones and Dave Rennie, turkeys voting for Christmas. We definitely probably would have said the same thing about Leo Cullen when he got Stuart Lancaster in at the time. I know he was kind of damaged goods after the World Cup, but getting a guy that experience in, and it's worked so well. So I think he would be brilliant at the job, and maybe somewhere down the line he might look at it, but I would be surprised if he took over from David Nucifora, but I could be very wrong on that.
He got Graham Henry, and even before that as well, to show that happy to learn.
The stuff they do with the Crusaders, he's a brilliant networker. Opening up all these different avenues and tapping into different resources, and that's a huge part of Leinster's success.
Yeah. So, if you're the IRFU, there aren't many other internal candidates for that role?
No, someone like Conor O'Shea, but he's obviously been over at the RFU, and it's still really not fully clear what his job is. Like I said, he's been going around, he's a key part of the review at the moment, but it's difficult to get a sense on what his actual role is. But someone like him,
Clive Woodward, not a big fan.
No, Clive Woodward isn't a big fan of many people, it seems.
From Clive Woodward, obviously.
Yeah. But it seems like he someone like that would be a good fit, whereas Leinster, I think, need Leo Cullen over the next couple of years with Lancaster leaving, because he's going to leave a massive void.
Okay. The Munster performance at the weekend, obviously, it creates a lot of difficulty for them in this competition, as you were pointing out today in the Irish Independent. The old tournament, with all its flaws, still gave you an opportunity to get back into it. But once you lose one of these games, you're really up against it.
Yeah, they are. I think the draw is relatively favourable, I would say, because we can obviously compare it to Ulster, and that's what I was doing in the piece today, whereas Ulster have back-to-back games against La Rochelle now, and you would not be confident of them picking up a win in either of them. And even if they did rally and put in a big performance this weekend, they're so inconsistent that you wouldn't have much faith in them going to France getting the win after Christmas. So Munster back-to-back against Northampton are very, very winnable games. If they win in Franklin's Gardens on Sunday, by the time Northampton come to Thomond Park, their interest could be out of it. Like, I think they're in around 6 in the Premiership table, if memory serves. So they're going to try and get into the playoffs. So they might send over a weakened team. Then you're looking at 5 points, and then you're back into it before you go to Toulouse. Whereas I just wouldn't have that same kind of optimism around Ulster. So Munster have left themselves with their backs against the wall, but they've given themselves, I think, a good solid platform on which to build. Like losing 39-0 away to Sale and losing narrowly to one of the best teams in the competition at home, I think are two very, very different things as well in terms of Munster and Leinster.
We talked with Quinny a good bit yesterday about the travel being a factor for Ulster and the early kick-off, and he kind of explained from a player's perspective, it's just tough. Like, you have to force down the meal beforehand. Obviously, it is easier for the home team. They sleep in their own beds, and it's it's a significant enough difference. But it's not 39-0. Like, no. We had very high hopes for Ulster.
Yeah, like, to be fair, I don't think Dan McFarlane used that as an excuse. He could have, but he didn't. And I would be more leaning to you now, albeit neither of us have been kind of professional rugby, so Quinny knows what he's talking about, but I think that can be overplayed a little bit as well. You look at Leinster, I know they didn't arrive until they still got there the night before, but they had a mad journey to get there as well. Like, they had to get taxis from an airport. A bus didn't show up after a really long delay. Now at least they got a proper night's kip the night before, but Ulster in a strange difficult position. The hangover from that RDS defeat is very evident, and their season now is threatening to, I would say, go off the rails, which sounds a bit strong, but if they're to lose at home to La Rochelle, which is a very real possibility, particularly because Rog has come in and changed the whole culture around La Rochelle. They're not going to send a weakened team to Belfast this weekend at all. They're going to be all guns blazing.
Blood.
Absolutely, they're champions as well, so that is a very, very difficult task. Now the flip side is, if they get a win there this weekend, Ulster, it could transform the season, but I wouldn't be too optimistic. I think we're seeing continuously that they're so reliant on a particular few players. Like, John Cooney is such a massive loss. They lack control at half back when John Cooney isn't there, because he almost plays the role as scrum half and out half. And you've got Nathan Doak there, who's still very much developing. And I think a lot of Ulster fans were probably annoyed that more of their players didn't get a look in with Ireland. You look at James Hume was sent back up the road after that Ireland A game, but we're probably seeing why Andy Farrell didn't pick a lot of these Ulster players. Like, I mean, Andy Farrell has a really good eye for form and things like that, and we're seeing that now. There's been big cries about why isn't Nathan Doak getting capped, and I think we're seeing over the last couple of weeks, particularly in the RDS when Leinster went after him and Cooney went off injured, that there's a lot of work to do, I think, in this Ulster team. And while they've done really well to get semi-finals, and I know they got to a final in 2020, but they got hammered by Leinster, there's still a big jump to go from where they were to get to that next level. And I think Munster have kind of been similar enough, knocking around that thing, but you see how big the gap is to get there. So I think there's questions over the mental maybe fragility of this Ulster squad. I mean, you look at the games they lost at the end of the last season, particularly over in South Africa, when Leinster were out of the equation in the URC, they were never going to get a better chance to win it, particularly because if they'd won over there against the Stormers, I think it was, they would have had a home final. So you mean, like, if you're not going to get it, then when are you? So think back to Toulouse in the Champions Cup as well, where they really should have won that game as well. So there are question marks over them. I think there's probably been a bit of an overreaction. I've seen like a lot of angry Ulster fans online calling for Dan McFarlane's head. Like, it's so easy to forget the job that he has done. Yeah. Like, I mean, we go back to Brian O'Driscoll's basket case. Not many people would have come in and wanted to go near that job. He came in, he steadied the ship, and all of a sudden you're, the expectations around the team suddenly change, and people have short memories, so they're capable of getting it back on track, but I would worry for them with a back-to-back dates against La Rochelle, who looked very good last weekend against Northampton as well.
Alright, Cian, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. That's Cian Tracey, the Irish Independent.